I'm Brian Barreira, an elder attorney in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and today's webinar is about how your estate plan affects financial aid for college. So our guest is John DeLorey. John, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm John DeLorey, College Planning Services. I'm up here in Newburyport, Massachusetts. I've been in the college financing business for over 30 years. And so I have a wealth of knowledge that I'll try to, give to you today in order to help you with any planning that you're going to do with your estates.
Okay, so let's start with what forms do colleges require for financial aid, the basics?
There are two basic forms. One is a federal form, which is called the FAFSA form. It's a free application for federal student assistance. And then for private colleges, there is what is called the CSS profile form. In 300 private colleges, we use that form in addition to the FAFSA form.
And then I believe colleges have their own some colleges have their own extra things that they have you fill out.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
now on the forms, let me just sort of explain. The student assets are calculated with a 25% conversion rate. So when a student has assets in their name or a trust or a cover deal, then the colleges are going to take 25% of that and add it to the parents' contribution.
Okay, well, so we'll get into that in a second, but first I want to get out of the way this whole idea of what kinds of businesses count on the FAFSA.
The only business valuation of the business that would be reflected on the FAFSA or CSS form would be someone that owns a business with more than 100 employees. With less than 100 employees, the colleges don't put a valuation on a business, but what they do is they look at the balance sheet of the business to see if there's lots of money in retained earnings, or if the client, is owed money by the corporation, or if they lent the corporation money. So they go to the balance sheet and they see what's going on in the balance sheet.
But otherwise, a business of what did you say, 100 employees, under 100, is exempt, which is an interesting turnabout. I mean, from that came in around 2005, I believe.
Correct. Yeah.
So, so people with businesses don't have to surrender their businesses for financial aid,
but they have to surrender the business tax return form.
Right.
A lot of people say, "Well, my business is not included. I'm going to take all my cash and put it into my business," and then all of a sudden, the college asks to see the balance sheet. And that's where that money would show up.
Okay.
And they'll just add it back into the parents' income. Okay.
So you mentioned the 25% conversion rate for on the form. So what if, let's go down the list of the typical things that parents and grandparents do for young children. A UTMA account, Uniform Transfers to Minors, which is the kid's money at age 21. UGMA, which is a uniform gifts at 18, a 2503C trust, which is a trust where the kid gets it at 21, and a Coverdell education IRA. Why don't you just go through all those and tell us how a lot of people are setting these up, and maybe when they hear all this, they won't be doing it anymore.
Well, the UTMA, UGMA, and the trusts are all includable assets on the financial aid form, regardless of when the trust payout provisions dictate. As long as there's a trust with the child's name on it, the college is going to want to know that, and they'll take 25% of that money and add it to the parents' contribution. The cover deal is a tax-free distribution, and that would come out as the child's money, and then the colleges would take 50% of that money as far as the for the kids' contribution.
All right. So when grandparents give money, put money in these accounts, they're not necessarily helping all that much because they could be hurting financial aid.
Could, depending on where the child goes to school. I mean, if the child goes to North Shore Community College or University of Lowell or University of Massachusetts in Amherst, probably is not going to hurt them. But if they're going to, you know, some blue blood schools or schools that are now $75,000 or $80,000, it could very well hurt them.
Okay. So what about a 529 plan?
529 plans are the grandparents' asset, unless they gift the money to the child and then put it into the 529 plan, then they're gifting it, so it's no longer their asset. But if a parent just sets up a grandparent sets up a 529 plan, they control that 529 plan. And then when they use that 529 plan to pay the tuition cost at a school, the college bursars office will see that money coming in. They'll alert the financial aid office, and whatever the payment is for the school from the 529 plan, the school either consider that as income or the student's asset for the subsequent financial aid filing year.
Okay. So again, it depends on what school you go to, but you know, the more expensive the private school, the less likely that these accounts are really helping.
Unless the grandparent is going to use a 529 plan when the grandchild is a senior in college, then it really doesn't matter because they're not going to fill out financial aid forms going forward.
Okay. But the grandparent, what if the grandparent just paid for the tuition for the first year instead of using the 529 plan?
The colleges bursar's office will see that there's a third-party payment, and then the colleges will get in touch with the parent, and they're going to raise all sorts of questions: who that person is, what their relationship is, how much more money they're going to, you know. So now it opens up a whole can of worms.
It doesn't seem like there's any winning here. Okay. So based on all these things, what steps, if people have all these accounts, what steps should they take to rectify it all? I mean, I can tell you, what I did is my child went to a private high school, so I used up a lot of the money on the private high school.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
What else can you do short of that?
Well, the 529 plan, I think it allows you to spend $10,000 a year on private high schools or elementary schools. I think that the grandparent, before they start to make any of these contributions, want to look at using non-reportable assets on the financial aid form, which are non-qualified annuities. So if the grandparent sets up a non-qualified annuity for the grandchild, then that's not a reportable asset on the financial aid forms. And then the grandparent or the child can then take money out of that annuity to help pay for the tuition costs.
Okay, but you can't get straight there from a UTMA, right?
Yeah,
you can't. Can you take the child's money out and put it into it? And
as long as you set up the annuity the way that the UTMA was set up, yeah, you can do that. You can't.
So the child would be buying the annuity then, right?
Correct. Yeah, but it's still not a reportable asset because it's a retirement plan. Okay. And the reason the retirement plans are not an includable asset is because of the instability of Social Security. That's the government's rationale on not including retirement plans on the federal financial aid forms.
Okay, so what's the ideal way for let's say a grandparent wants they don't know how long they're going to live. They want to take care of their grandchildren and help toward the education. What are the ways a grandparent can set things up, knowing that they may not live to be able to do things when the kid is 18 to 22?
They set up an annuity, then they don't have to worry about it. The annuity is going to grow. The
Okay.
child will be the beneficiary.
That's really the only thing they can do. Okay, so what about setting up a trust? Now, we talked about two different kinds of trusts the other day before we got on here. Let's talk about the kind of trust that's a family trust, where you set it up for the benefit. You set up a trust. You're a grandparent. You set up the trust for the benefit of your child and your grandchildren, and money can be used. The child is not the trustee, but the money can be used for any of them throughout these college age years. So what would colleges say about that kind of trust?
They would take the trust and they would divide it by the number of beneficiaries, and then that would be the student's assets. So if there's if grandma and grandpa set up a trust, and for their own child and their child's daughter-in-law, and then for their grandchild, then there are three people, and they put in $120,000. Then each of those three individuals would own 30% of that money. So then the child would have to report $40,000 on their asset, and the parent would have to report $80,000 on as their asset.
And they all do this. They all just count the number of beneficiaries.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. All right. So I'm winging it here. So what
Sure.
if I just add a bunch of extra beneficiaries?
You could do that. If someone wanted to be really devious, what they would do is they would set up the family trust, and they would get their own tax ID number, and they would have a different tax ID number. So when the money came out of the trust, the trust 1041 form, the colleges wouldn't see that, but they're lying on the form.
Right.
And there's a $20,000 fine and a felony conviction for misrepresentation.
Well, if I'm a grandparent and I set up a trust for my issue, and I name a cousin as the trustee, they really have to set up to get an employer ID number, a taxpayer ID number for the trust.
And a lot of people don't know. They know that the grandpa or grandma has something, but they don't know what it is. And those have become very delicate issues for generations to talk about. Well, how much money are you going to give me, kind of. And then if there's siblings involved, it gets to be complicated. It can cause some hard feelings once the parents die. And as you know, you don't know or understand your brother and sister until you share an estate with them.
So what if you then pay for part of the tuition for the first year? Now, the financial aid office finds out that there was another source of payment, and now they know about the trust, right?
Yeah.
So does that cause financial aid problems for year two?
Oh yeah. Colleges generally won't go back and take money away. If they give someone the money, they don't want to get involved with trying to take it back. They just won't give it in the future.
Okay. So this leads me to my no beneficiary trust idea.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
The grandparent. Now, grandparents often are moving money out of their name because of the 5-year Mass Health look back period.
Yep.
So if you need nursing home care in the next 5 years, the money's in the picture, but you're trying to get by the 5-year clock. So you put money into a trust that has no beneficiaries until a certain date that we pick, where we know all the kids are through college, or we figure any kid that goes to college, we probably pick, like June 1 of when the kid turns 23, something like that. So no beneficiary until then. Colleges, I mean, there would be no reason to look at that.
No,
If the parent needed the money, now at the end date of the trust, the parent, the child, the parent whose kids are going to college, is the beneficiary, becomes the beneficiary, and the trust terminates. Right. So along the way, let's say an aunt is the trustee. The child could borrow money from the trust to help pay for tuition. Is any of that reportable?
no, it wouldn't, no, because it's borrowed money. But then you get back to the question of whose tax ID number is used.
Well, that would have to, you'd have to get, that's an irrevocable trust.
So you'd have to
That would
get-
have to get a tax ID number. It wouldn't be a
so-
social security number.
Yeah, so whatever the money's invested, they would 1099 to the trust, to that tax ID number. No, so if the child borrows money, they're just borrowing money like they would from a bank or from, from the federal government. It's just borrow money.
So that might be the only kind of trust that works on the financial aid end.
Correct.
Unless, you create a trust where you name all your nephews and nieces and first cousins as beneficiaries, with no intention for them to ever really receive anything from the trust.
Yeah, unless the college asks to see a copy of the trust. Generally, they don't. They'll ask on the financial aid form, are you the beneficiary of a trust? If so, what's the value of the trust? And they'll take it at face
But then
value.
they'll ask, how many beneficiaries are there?
They won't ask that.
Well, how are they?
Last-
Well, you gave the example before of there are 3 beneficiaries and they're going to count 1/3 against. the
Well,
student.
that would be self-reporting by the person filling out the financial aid form. And again, the colleges look at it and say, well, you're filling out that financial aid form based on a $20,000 fine in a felony conviction for misrepresentation. So we're taking that as face value. There are only 3 crimes in the country that do not have a statute of limitations: murder, treason, and then lying on the financial aid forms. So it never goes away. So how people get caught is they get caught through something else that they'll do. They'll get caught through an IRS audit, or they'll get caught another way, unless someone, drops a dime on them and tells the school what they're doing. Even then, the schools, they just don't, it's really a messy situation for the schools. Not a messy situation for the IRS. I mean, they go after people for flakery, because there's no difference than lying on the financial aid form or going into the local Sunoco gas station with a gun and robbing it. You're stealing money from the government. It's just doing one, you're doing it through a lie, and the other one you're doing it through a physical means. So not a good idea.
Okay. So grandparents who want to provide for their grandchildren and put them into the trust are causing that to be countable.
Yes.
What if the grandchildren are not in and just the parent? And
Yes.
it's a pure generation, they're going to count the whole thing as the parent's money?
Yep.
Even if I'm the trustee and I have no duty to give a penny to that person.
Yeah, colleges don't have to abide by third-party agreements. They just have to, they just look at it sort of black and white. We don't have to, whatever that trust says, they don't care. Are you the beneficiary? I mean, I had a client who was a beneficiary of trust, and she wasn't going to get that money until she was 50 years of age. She still had to report it and she explained to the school, and we went back and forth, and the school understood, and they made an exception, professional judgment. So the grandmother was afraid that her daughter would rip through that inheritance if she was younger. So that's why,
Okay.
waited until the woman was 50.
Okay. So so there is a chance that if you set up a trust where the child, your child, who's a parent, is not the beneficiary or cannot receive anything for a very long time, there is a chance that that won't be counted.
Correct. I mean, it could be medical issues that the trust was set up for, that someone has some severe medical issues that need to be taken care of in the future. Yeah, I mean, the colleges would use that as a, more likely the smaller liberal arts colleges, you're not going to get a lot of touchy-feely stuff at a BU or Northeastern, but you could walk into a financial aid office at Bowdoin or Bates or one of the small schools and talk to the financial aid office and explain the situation.
Okay.
It's easier to deal with it that way than in a big environment where you're just a number.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been very interesting. Is there anything else you want to say about these annuities that work?
Well, I was just going to mention about inheritance money.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's say that someone fills out the financial aid forms and, they don't have a lot. And then all of a sudden the grandparent dies and leaves a substantial sum of money to their child and to their grandchild. Okay. Now, when they filled the forms out, they didn't list it because they didn't have it. But now that they have the inheritance, it really becomes a moral issue with the families, because they say, I have the financial aid. The school doesn't know I have this inheritance money. So why would I want to tell them? Again, they're going to find out because you're going to put that money into a bank account. You're going to get interest on it. And that interest is going to show up in your tax return form. And they see a copy of your tax return form. And this is done all automatically. It'll pop up. Oh, last year, this person had 0 interest in dividend interest. And this year they have $2,000 dividend interest. Well, what's going on? So that's how the colleges will pick that up. And it's all computerized.
But there's no line on the FAFSA that says that you'll report any change in financial circumstances within 30 days?
It says on the financial aid form, if your financial situation changes materially, then you have to let the college know immediately.
Immediately. Okay.
So like if a spouse dies, you let the college know immediately. But then the college says, oh, well, I wonder how much life insurance the spouse has and who's the beneficiary. And so they now say, wait a minute, there's going to be more money here for this family.
Okay. So in your example of the inheritance, then maybe it would make sense to delay the distribution from the estate or trust to the beneficiary and find some reason to hold it back.
Yeah, that becomes, because eventually the accountant is going to see what the client is doing, and they're not, because then the client, I have a case now like that, and the guy trying to keep the estate open, and the accountant wants to close the estate, and what the guy's doing is using the estate and he's renovating his house with that money. So he doesn't want to take constructive receipt on it, so he thinks he's going to be cagey and then leave it in the estate and use the money inside the estate for his own personal, needs. So generally accountants like to close estates,
Right, but you don't have to close it right away. You could delay it a little bit.
You can wait, you can delay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, John, unless there's something else you want to say about annuities, I think we've covered just about everything on our checklist.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is if people don't understand that, and as you know, people are doing Medicaid planning. If they put money into an immediate annuity and then take that money out, that's no longer an accountable asset for calculation purposes. So parents have money, they want to, set up a fund for their grandchild. They can save up a bit and then, go out and buy a non-qualified deferred annuity, have the child as a beneficiary, and then have a family trust own the annuity. And the family trust could have their child as one of the trustees.
Yeah, or the grandparents could have their estate plan state that the trustee or the personal representative of the estate could buy one of these non-qualified annuities and
Could do that.
distribute that to the parent,
Could do that also.
and then probably don't have to even report any part of that.
It's amazing that, people will look at colleges and they don't realize that the extent of what colleges see that people are trying to finagle to get more financial aid from them. And I'll give you an example. Maybe about 6 years ago, the colleges then are requiring someone to come up with an official IRS transcript. And what wise guys were doing is they were bogusing up tax return forms, bogusing up W-2 forms, and then using that tax return form to file financial aid. And they would just say self-filing. And so the college would look at it and say, well, this on the FAFSA form, we have to believe it. Oh yeah, people would, in the past 10 years, people who would flagrantly lie on the financial aid forms, it's gone from 5% to 25%. So the colleges know that 25% of people are filing for financial aid are lying on the form somehow. So they then wipe, they don't know which 25%, so they include everyone in that area. And there are situations that in the colleges don't ask a lot of questions. They take everything that you're saying to them at face value and they interpret it, and then they come up with their own decisions. And then they have the bursar's office watching for checks coming in outside from the parent. So if grandma or grandpa wants to give money, to the school, better go down and get a cashier's check from the St. Jean's Credit Union. If they want to send a check directly, send it, give it to the parent and let the parent send it in. And the colleges don't know where that, cashier's check is.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, good.
Great. Well, thank you, John. We'll end on that note. That's a practical suggestion.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. If you have any questions or you get a client that needs some help, just let me know and I'll give any assistance.
Well, all the clients, anybody watching this is going to have direct access to you and your information about you.
Good. Okay.
All right. Take care.
I appreciate it. Be well. Bye-bye now.
Bye.